welcome back to my channel. This is Kentucky Lee. So today we're going to be starting the segment 2000 Me. What is that? I was a teenager in the 2000s. There were a lot of peasant tops. People were all shopping at Abercrombie & Fitch and American Eagle. There was thin eyebrows. Ugh. And there were YA books, but they weren't, I don't know, really popular. I mean, they were, but not in the way they are today. The idea that teenagers had this kind of section that they could go to, it was there, but it wasn't like how it is now. It was pretty sparse, slim pickings. When I was 12 years old, I thought I was going to write the next great American vampire novel. I would spend hours on my computer just typing away and letting my mind flourish and my imagination just go wherever it could. A lot of that was inspired by Anne Rice. I read The Vampire Lestat when I was 12 and I was just completely enthralled. Like, this woman who is queen told these stories and gave these characters that should have been evil and horrible. She gave them humanity. I was also inspired by a young writer, Amelia Atwater Rhodes, who wrote her first vampire book when she was 14 years old. She was a freshman in high school and was published. So I looked at that and thought, you know what? That's me. I can totally do that. It didn't help that I got my hands on my mom's romance novels. I wanted to know what it was like to fall in love. So all of these factors played into me wanting to write this book. My fascination with vampires can be summed up from a line in the second chapter of this book I was working on when I was 12. It reads, "After all, vampires are the most seductive and sexy creatures on the planet." At 12, I knew exactly what sexy and seductive meant. I think a lot of the reason why young people love the mythos and legends and just the overall ideas of vampires is because vampires are everything that teenagers are not. Besides being forever young, they're flawless. Their beauty is beyond compare in most stories. They're intriguing and appealing, and that is pretty much the last thing any teenager really is. Not only that, most vampires seem to have superpowers. Super strength, they can read minds, they can change into other animals. Though being a vampire is like going through puberty, especially for girls. It's soul-sucking and angsty, and you're always wanting people that you can't have, and there's blood. A lot of blood. But you know, young Katie honed her craft. I think we could take some tips away from her writing that you could use for any novel. So for the segment of 2000 Me, I'm going to give you 6 tips when writing your novel. Here to help us is the first chapter of this novel. Number 1, you need to open with the most vague prologue you can think of. Later on, it will have nothing to do with your actual story. She lay there, sound asleep. Her chest rose and fell to the rhythm of her slow heartbeat. He stared at her, his eyes cold and black as the night. She murmured softly as if her dream was becoming her reality. He took a few steps towards her and stopped a few inches from her beautiful face. He thought, if only this curse wasn't placed upon me. If only I could hold back my temptation and wake her, to tell her I'm a monster who cannot control his bloodlust. He placed his hand on her cheek and lightly grazed his lips onto her. He whispered, "I'm sorry, Netka." His fangs slowly appeared from his mouth and he bent down towards her neck. He didn't know that she was waiting. Her hand slowly fell to the lower side of the bed and she picked up a small dagger. She smiled to herself and pulled her hand upward. She leaned towards his ear and said, "I will see you in the afterlife, vampire." I don't know why her voice sounds like that, why they're identical. Not realizing what was above his back, he looked up and gave her a confused look. "What?" She smiled and plunged the dagger in his back, not realizing who it really was. Howling in pain, he screamed as his pale skin began to quickly disintegrate. She glanced up at him, seeing his eyes shocked and pain-filled. She realized it was him. "How could you?" he rasped. She looked at his pain-filled face and realized it was him. We repeated a lot. "You!" Tears rolled down her cheeks and she cried, "I didn't know, I swear on my word." His eyes darkened and he screamed, "You damned vampire hunter! How did you know?" He snarled and bit at her. "I never meant for this to happen, I swear. I thought you were Damien. I swear." She cried, dodging his fangs. He growled and slapped her with his rotting hand. She grabbed the dagger from his back and rammed it into the place where his stone heart had once been. He howled and screamed in pain. "I'm sorry. Please forgive me," she asked as she pushed the dagger further into his disintegrating body. His body shook and blew into 1,000 pieces. A piercing scream filled the air. Dun dun dun! Already, straight out the gate, you are getting an antagonist, you're getting love, you're getting a disintegrating, rotting vampire body, and she's a vampire hunter. Number 2, character descriptions are really important. You need to describe every one of your characters down to the minute details. Her honey brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, and her bangs fell in front of her dark eyes. They'd always done that. She wore a denim skirt with a red pullover, with a hood hanging off of her neck. A silver chain was draped around her neck with a crucifix to match it. Brown clogs covered her size 9 feet. That really dates me. I don't think anybody that is below the age of maybe 26 would know what a clog is. She wore no makeup, and she knew she never would. Then we introduce the male counterpart to this character, who, by the way, her name is Alexandra, like in most of the writing, but we'll get to the other part about her. He was tall with a very dark tan. His black hair fell in front of his gorgeous caramel colored eyes. Caramel capitalized. Sidocris wore baggy jeans and a tight red body shirt. It was obvious he had built himself well. Every part of him was muscle. In case you didn't know, these characters are so sexy. Number 3, flashbacks are essential to a vampire novel. Januarius, 12th year of Ramesses, sidebar. In flashback scenes in this book, her name is Nefernetka. I think maybe I'd watched The Mummy a few too many times, but she's called Netka. Number 4, there is never enough angst. Add more angst. 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 Sidocris took her face into his hands and closed her nose with his index finger and his thumb. Beep. He brought her face towards his and kissed her gently. Netka knew this was wrong, not only because they weren't courting each other, but that he was a general and she a priestess. This was not allowed, and he knew it as well, but Sidocris didn't care. He never would. He pulled her up from the water, his fingers releasing her little nose. Nefernetka pushed away, saying, "No, no, we cannot do this." He looked into her eyes and wrapped his arms around her. I know. I'm sorry. Netka, it's just because." Sidocris cut himself off. He didn't say anything. He knew if he did, it would ruin their friendship. Basically friend-zoning himself. The next part of working on your novel is actually tip number 5. Introducing your antagonist at a completely random time. You don't need to plan this out at all. Leave this as vague as possible. Februarius, 12th year of Ramesses. "Osiris must be angry. The Dark Ones have declared war," Deity cried. Neferneka's heart stopped for a moment. She was dumbstruck. She fell to her knees and placed her face into her hands. Nefernetka shook her head in disbelief. The Dark Ones. Osiris, she thought. "That means Sidocris will have to go," she whispered. Her voice muffled. She then lifted her head and looked at the ceiling. Osiris, what has your kingdom done to you? We have followed your every command and omen. Why? This is an excerpt from the antagonist. Dark desert regions. Kingdom of Miss Rock? Majesty. News from the outside world. Oh, shit. Voice rasp. That's not raspy. It came from a man with deep black eyes, skin white, more white than snow, and silver hair that not only competed with the stars' radiant glow, but outdone them as well. That's a terrible sentence. He was tall, appearing around the age of 20, and he stood proud, not afraid of his commander, who wore a black cloak, shielding its face. What is it, Jada? The masked figure questioned. News from the desert. Our posts have seen Ramesses' men circling our area. The black-eyed man answered. Why is this a problem? The figure shook what appeared to be its head wildly. No, this cannot be true. It cannot be! It yelled furiously. Majesty, calm yourself. You cannot strain yourself in your condition. Apparently the villain is pregnant. Do not lecture me, child. You are young and doomed. You are young and don't know anything yet. Pro tip, all villains call their underlings and really anybody particular child. The commander sighed and began to cackle. None of this is funny, Jada muttered angrily, crossing his arms. Oh, but it is, Jada. They will fall right into my trap, and when they do, I will be there to welcome them to hell. Tip number 6. You want to leave your readers with a bombshell at the end of every chapter. She looked up after hearing a whispering voice. A dark figure stood there expressionless. He raised his hand and pointed to where the sea was. Neferneca looked at Cytocris's lifeless body and peered back up at the figure. It was gone. She gazed at Cytocris one last time and thought, I won't ever forget you, Cytocris. This I promise you. I will go through my life knowing I knew Cytocris, the greatest of all Egypt's generals. ... Bonus tip. Bastard is the ultimate insult. Go on, Neferneca, kill me, he said, but without me you will not live. Your beloved Cytocris will not live. He grabbed a hold of her sword and threw her down. Jada pinned her small body, feeling her struggle as he held her down. With all Neca's might, she threw him off and grabbed her sword, jabbing him in the chest. What were you saying, you bastard? Do not use bastard sparingly. I hope all my tips helped you guys. As you can tell, 12-year-old Katie was an imaginative, brilliant, blossoming writer with a lot of potential. I think we can agree that 2000 Me is going to be a good segment, especially if we continue to read this book, my angsty poetry, and journal entries. Stay tuned, come back and visit with me, comment, like, and subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye! I remember a lot of peasant tops. Okay. I'm gonna kill my dogs and this cat.